The Pat Kenny Show on News Talk.
With Mater Private Network. During current restrictions, don't ignore your health concerns. Our expert team is ready to help.
You will undoubtedly have seen the pictures over the weekend, startling images from our nearest neighbour. Massive queues at petrol stations, people filling up jerry cans and hoarding fuel. The source of the problem is a shortage of specialist tanker drivers, and industry associations across Britain estimate that in total the need for drivers across the British industries, it could be as many as 100,000 that are needed. For more on this topic, I'm joined by Sky News correspondent Enda Brady and CEO of Fuels for Ireland, Kevin McPartlin. And Enda, the latest we hear is that the army is going to get drafted in.
Yeah, that's the latest idea from the UK government this morning here, Anton. I've just been out for a drive. I live in Oxfordshire. There's no fuel in any of the towns and villages around where I live. And I've crossed over into Buckinghamshire this morning as well, and they're running out of fuel there as well. Some reports this morning that 90% of forecourts have run out of fuel. So we've seen a weekend of panic buying, and it's all sparked really from reports last week that BP, one of the major service station operators here, had issues at 5 of their 1,200 service stations. That got reported. And then there was a leak from a government meeting last week with various different stakeholders, ranging from the Haulage Association to the Petrol Retailers Association. Information from that meeting with government ministers got leaked to the media, and the end result was a lot of panic buying Friday, Saturday and Sunday.
Is the suggestion therefore, Enda, that if the panic buying hadn't occurred, there would not have been a shortage but for those 5 BP stations?
Well, look, the government are saying that there is no shortage of fuel, that it's in the depots and the refineries, and the problem lies in people's reading of the media and people's panicking and behaviour over the weekend. I mean, it has been a bit of a chicken and egg situation, really, but ultimately the UK is down 100,000 HGV lorry drivers. The government has a couple of cards that it wants to play. They're saying that they will issue short-term 3-month visas till Christmas for European lorry drivers to come over here and work. And also now this prospect of the army being drafted in to drive the lorries to bring the fuel. But I mean, we're reading reports this morning on social media of healthcare workers not having enough fuel in their cars to actually get in and work. And of course, we're still in a pandemic. So it's a very, very difficult situation. But in terms of short-term fixes, I can't see one. I think this is going to go on for months. To
the first of those solutions, or rather to the second one, you said about the 3-month visas to bring in lorry drivers. If I remember rightly, last Christmas, a load of European lorry drivers spent a large portion of Christmas stuck on a runway in Kent. It's hardly the kind of thing that would cause them to say, yep, I'll have another shot for a 3-month contract.
And it's interesting, pictures from last Christmas are being widely circulated on social media this morning amongst European lorry drivers, kind of laughing and saying that there's no way they're going to come over and sort out this problem. So I think, you know, the UK government has got itself into a huge fix, and the blame game has started already. Cabinet ministers coming out this morning and saying that the public are to blame for panic buying fuel. And, you know, there is no short-term solution to this. There may well be fuel in all the refineries and the depots, but right now, I mean, the behaviour I've seen over the weekend, people literally running around with jerry cans looking for fuel. Some supermarkets have put a £30 limit per customer. That was when they had fuel, and now many of them have run out. And of course, chuck into the mix as well this morning, we've had the climate change activists blocking roads on the M25 at Heathrow for the 6th day in a fortnight. So, you know, you could say we're in for quite a long winter here. One assumes no matter how hard the army puts their shoulder against the wheel, they can't have that many HGV drivers with the necessary qualifications knocking around in the British Army, do they? No, what they will have is they will have like Royal Logistics Corps. They will have engineers who their job is to get material from place to place. So they absolutely will have people capable of driving HGV lorries. But, you know, in all honesty, people don't sign up to be a soldier, to be an engineer in the RLC, in the British Army, to start driving fuel to supermarkets. Look, I think that's the last card that the UK government will try play, because look at the way the world will read this. people will see guys in uniforms delivering fuel to supermarkets. It's not a good look. You got to think about the semantics of all of this. And it's really interesting that in the right-wing conservative supporting press today, none of the newspapers on the front page are addressing the root cause of this, which many critics are arguing is the decision to leave the European Union and to tell these lorry drivers in the first place that, you know what, we got British people who can do these jobs just as well, lads.
And in fact, in some of the online versions of those newspapers, they are now squarely putting the blame on leaks from Cabinet and saying that that is what caused it rather than any underlying economic reality. To what extent, Andy, do you put any stock in that suggestion that some of the effects of Brexit were cushioned or buffered by virtue of the pandemic and the lockdown, and that it is only now that that is easing that the Brexit reality is hitting home, and this is the first major example of it?
Well, if we look at some of the issues that we've had here in the United Kingdom in the last few weeks, we've had a major fast food retailer run out of milkshakes. We've had KFC run out of chicken. Nando's have run out of chicken at times as well. We've had a CO2 shortage, which is going to affect the drinks industry and the food and particularly the poultry industry in the run-up to Christmas. So every single week there has been a big shock headline about shortages, and now it's come down to fuel. And I mean, I've never seen anything like, I'm trying to think when was the last time I saw queues like I saw at the weekend, and you have to go back, I think probably 19, 20 years. And there was an issue with lorry drivers, if you remember. There was blockades and what have you. I remember covering them. That's 2 decades ago. But over the weekend, I mean, nowhere, anywhere. I was with my young lad yesterday at his soccer match under 14s, and the visiting team, I spoke to some of their parents, and there was no fuel where they had travelled from at all. And people were really concerned about how they were going to get to work this week. And this is, you know, one small community in Oxfordshire, and that will be mirrored across. I think it's predominantly an English problem at the moment. There's certainly some issues in Scotland in built-up urban areas like Glasgow and Edinburgh, some issues in, again, urban areas of Wales. But in terms of London and the southeast of England, the fuel is pretty much gone in 90% of the forecourts.
Enda, thank you very much. Enda Brady from Sky News. Now, of course, particularly on social media, when this gets discussed, a lot of people say, careful there, but for the grace of God might go we. Kevin McPartlin, CEO of Fuels for Ireland, is with us to answer that question. Kevin, what are the chances that, as some of the people and some of the commentators in the UK are saying, that this is a global problem, this is a COVID logistics problem, this is not a Brexit effect, and any minute now we'll face the same thing?
Morning, Anton. I would strongly disagree with that. You know, if we look, I think as Enda said, look, the starting point for this was there was a relatively small problem, a small number of forecourts were unable to be stocked as a result of a driver shortage. And you haven't asked me on for my political analysis of Brexit, but I think most people would argue that that's related to Brexit. Then this kind of almost like a mass hysteria among oil consumers in Britain, and I think Enda's right, it is mainly England, took hold, and people went and just all restocked at once. And not only did they restock as in fill their tanks to the brim, you know, as you mentioned yourself, you see these pictures of jerry cans and far less appropriate containers for fuel being used. The reality of this industry, Anton, is that very limited stock is held on forecourts. Some of the busiest forecourts in this country, and I'm sure it's the same in Britain, would be restocked several times a day because the volume going through them is so great. So if you have an interruption of any sort, it escalates very quickly, and that's what's happening in the UK right now. I certainly wouldn't agree with Enda that this is likely to be a problem that will last for more than a couple of days, because people are not using more fuel than they were using last week or 2 weeks ago or 6 months ago. What they've done is they've just all bought at the same time. So those people will not need to restock in the next few days. And as the delivery drivers get back out and restock all of the service stations, I'm pretty sure it will be back to relative normality in England relatively soon. The most important thing I can say, though, to News Talk listeners is there is zero problem here. We're not in the same situation at all in any way. We have no concerns about our capacity to maintain stocks at forecourts, as we have done forever, as we have done in the last 18, 20 months where things have been very difficult. Service stations have always kept open. People have always been able to get in and get their fuel, and that's been able to make sure that essential workers, essential services stayed on the road throughout COVID.
Refilling from where, Kevin? How does the Irish system work?
Oh, well, I mean, there are terminals which tend to be in the ports. So about 50% of all of the fuel that comes into Ireland comes through Dublin Port, and it goes off then. And sometimes it goes directly from there to forecourt. Sometimes it will go to a regional distributor en route, but that's how it's done.
So it is that tanker ships came in, are offloaded into the large tanks, predominantly in Dublin Port and I assume Cork and other ports around the country. And then there is a constant stream of tankers loading and unloading in and out to every forecourt.
Exactly that. And you know, it might be of interest to say that when we, you know, in kind of January of this year, when the immediate impact of Brexit was being felt, we were very aware that there could be traffic problems at Dublin Port. We all heard, the talk of delays. So we were preparing to make sure that we could have maintained supply if there was some traffic disruption. That's not even the level of concern that we have right now. We just don't see there's a problem at the moment at all. And
the critical factor that the UK faced, which was the shortage of lorry drivers, I assume we're not in the same position. There are guys there, there are girls in some instances there to drive the lorries.
Exactly. I mean, look, it's a competitive market for drivers, and it has been for a while. But we can maintain stocks as we have done throughout COVID, as we did before COVID, as we will do going on into the future. The problem is in the UK, they did have quite a heavy reliance on migrant workers for their HGV drivers, but not only HGV, particularly for fuel, because you were right to say not every HGV driver is qualified to transport fuel around. They did have a large dependence. Brexit has had a massive impact on that, and there's a number of people who have gone back to their home country or gone elsewhere because they no longer felt that they were able to work in the UK.
If you were a betting man, Kevin, the suggestion that by loosening the restrictions on visas for a 3-month special privilege period to come to the UK and drive trucks, that is a solution to the problems they're facing. Do you think there'll be much in the way of uptake from EU hauliers saying, let me race to the UK?
I don't have a great deal more expertise on that than you would, Anton. I would be surprised, but that's as close to a layman's opinion as you'll get on this.
Kevin, thank you very much. That's Kevin McPartland, who is CEO of Fuels for Ireland.